Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming into Studio K. I believe we are starting bang on time. Get in. As a conference organiser, I really love it when speakers start on time. I love it even more when they finish on time, so that's exactly what we'll be trying to do. So I'm Claire Eason-Bassett. I'm the conference director for Agile on the Beach, amongst other things, and I am delighted to be presenting this session on the Agile Guide to Life. Now, this came about as a random idea just before the speaker deadline. Rachel and I were just chatting, and we kind of went, well, we kind of use Agile in lots of different ways, and particularly use it outside of work. We will talk a little bit about Agile work, but for us, it's about the broader picture of life, and that's what we're going to start talking through a little bit of this morning. Rach.
Hi, I'm Rachel Picken, and if I can get the tweaker working. I haven't got the tweaker, thing in.
Here we go. Oh, there we go.
I was so organised with everything else.
So close and yet so far sometimes.
Just do it manually.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, my name's Rachel Picken, and Claire and I have worked together for about a decade, I think,
Just over,
professionally. And I am a chartered PR practitioner. And what that means is I'm very interested in PR strategy. And this is the third time I've spoken at Agile on the Beach, because back in 2012 I looked at how you could apply Agile project management to the PR planning stage. So I've got several hats, as many people do. Many working mums have several hats. I'm also the UK feature writer for a magazine called Agile Vox. So I was here last year covering Agile on the Beach for the Scrum Alliance magazine.
As I said, I'm the conference director for Agile on the Beach. I'm also the owner and director of Mackerel Sky Events, and I am moving. I am off to London town, back to the Big Smoke, to join English National Ballet as their head of business development and events, which is a bit of a big move, but I actually started my career with them, so it's kind of full circle. And my family are doing a minimum viable move. I'll talk about that a bit more later. And last year I spoke at the conference on game theory applied to large-scale event production, i.e. this gig, and the idea of applying mathematical theory, very much as Gert talked about yesterday morning, to practical situations and how we can use that to improve our practice, our decision-making at the end of the day. And I'm also a trustee of a number of different charities, but most specifically Bath Dance.
So the other thing about Claire and I is that's our professional focus, but this is our actual life. So we have other identities. In my case, bunny mama. I've just got 2 rabbits at home, which me and my boyfriend talk about obsessively. I'm a frazzle single mummy. I'm an ex-wife, and this is one of my children who this morning decided she wanted to go to the doctors because she's got heat rash. I had 0 bandwidth to take her to the doctors, so I had to fob her off with chocolates. That also involved putting her in the shower this morning, and then I attacked myself with the shower head. So I arrived at the conference this morning with a slightly damp right breast. And this is just normal life. And yesterday, unbeknownst to me, I was invited to be part of the round table discussion on the live feed about resilience and burnout. And the irony of it was that I took myself home at lunchtime yesterday because I was burnt out. So I was lying in bed when I should have been here doing a round table discussion. But yeah, and this is some of the other hats that Claire wears.
I think the key point in this is that we all have multiple parts to our lives. This is not a single track. We are all dealing with multiple strands all the time. Whether, in my case, it's being the owner of a lovely, if slightly challenging Labrador, whether it's being mum to George, who is 6.5 and is an engineer to his very core, and insists on solving problems for me. You can imagine how well that goes down. And sometimes, particularly women feel this, I know, but I don't think it's just gender specific, that need to please, that need to require everybody else's requirements before your own, that need to fulfill those needs before you put yourself in that position of having some time or some space or doing something that fulfills you and really energizes you and all of those things. And so part of this session is really recognizing that we all are in that situation of having multiple hats, multiple roles, multiple requirements on our time and energy and effort, and yeah, we have a particular, we'll have our own configuration of those. They're not the same. They are all very, very different across all of our different requirements.
So, see, these are the topics we're hoping to cover today. Claire sent me this. Claire and I chat on WhatsApp quite a lot. And she sent me this recently, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. So we're hoping to cover parenting, dating. I missed the pitch this morning, the speaker pitch. Had I been at the speaker pitch, I would have said, I'm going to share with you how you can use Kanban to get laid. Touch a little bit on Agile divorce, Agile leadership, friendship and work. Agile parenting. Okay, this is a bit of a montage of our children. This is my youngest digging with my mum's Labrador. This is my two with our pet bunny rabbits. And this is Claire's son, George. And I just remember being pregnant with Olivia and going to all the parenting classes and the NCT classes, National Childbirth Trust, and of having it all figured out in my head about how maternity leave was going to work and how I was going to go back to work. And then I actually had a meltdown with my then husband in the middle of a breastfeeding workshop when I realised that I cannot manage my child to feed on a schedule. Children and life is not waterfall. And what I've realised about parenting, and it doesn't always work, but I'm trying to apply a little bit of self-organising teams to my parenting, because these two squabble all the time and I get sick of the, Mum, she's really annoying me. And sometimes I feel like children's lives are so overscheduled these days. They don't have time to get bored. It's really important that you allow time in your parenting schedule for them to be bored. I had a bit of a heart attack this morning because I realised I'd forgotten Olivia's little friend's roller disco party tonight. And yeah, I'm now panicking me but ordering presents on Amazon because everything's so busy. But I started thinking about how you can apply the Agile Manifesto and Agile principles to parenting. But yeah, self-organising teams, just think about that if you've got squabbling kids. Put them in a room and let them figure it out.
I think one of the big things, certainly when I had George, was that I realised about 6 months in, after beating myself up, that I wasn't getting it right and that I seemed to be always getting it wrong and that everybody else was coping far, far better than I was or could. And at that point, when your self-confidence is pretty low anyway, and again, that's not just because I was the one that had given birth. My husband was fairly much in the same boat, although to be fair, he didn't actually help that situation. I realised that everybody is guessing. We are all responding to change over following the plan because nobody plans them. You can't plan them. You can't organise them to do what you want them to do. Or at least, in my experience, I can't. One word from me, and they all do what they like. So we're constantly in that position of having to negotiate that change all the time, and it is exhausting. So the way that my family, this is my husband Adrian, the way that we've started to address the chaos that is family EB is our own version of Kanban boarding. Now I appreciate, for the purists in the room, this is not pure Kanban. I appreciate that. Bear with me. This is as good as I'm ever going to get, right? Because he's a mechanical engineer. My son, as I said, is an engineer, and I have to convince them that this is good. And I did it by introducing it by stealth. I started with, let's write a list. And it evolved into, let's look at a process. Let's allocate tasks and take ownership of this. And it started with me writing the lists. And now it's not. Now it's Adrian, and it's my son George, and George does quite like wiping off the list and redrawing something else that he's dreamt up. But these aren't lists that are work-focused. These are not jobs to be done. This is part of being Team EB. And we have family rules, a bit like an Agile Manifesto for our family. And they're on a decal on the wall above our stairs. And it's things like, try everything twice. We're a rugby family, so always pass backwards. Love to infinity and beyond. be kind and generous. All those things that fit really nicely with actually what we do on a day-to-day basis in Agile. But for the family, it needed a little bit of a tweaking to become perhaps a bit more of a UX-friendly kind of process. And particularly to get their buy-in, because I can't, as I've already said, I can't organise them. I'd love to. Believe me, I would love to be able to organise them, but I can't. Damn it, they have minds of their own. And, and so this was our tool for enabling us all to see that we'd made progress in a day, that we'd got stuff done, and also flag up the stuff that wasn't being done, and our backlogs and our work in progress. And so you can see this idea of translating a Kanban board into a daily life thing without taking it too seriously, without being too rigid about the rules, but making it useful. Because if it's not useful, there is no point, and they are never going to get it, and they're never going to use it. So this whiteboard sits in our lounge, and it's not particularly attractive, and it's not particularly beautiful. However, it is possibly the most useful thing in our house now. So talking about agile life and the idea of hatch, match, and dispatch. Now, delightfully, last year, my niece, the little one in the middle, was born on exactly the same day and exactly the same time as my son was born 6 years previously. The probability is very, very small of that happening. And she's an utter delight. But as all children do when they arrive in this world, they generally cause chaos. And they shuffle the balance of the world around us. And so similarly, my sister, and obviously nobody can share this until the 20th of October because that's her wedding dress when she's getting married. Shh, don't tell Geordie. And so I'm supporting her in organising her wedding. Now, you can appreciate, as an event organiser, there is an element of temptation to treat my sister's wedding like any other client project. I can't and I mustn't. And I repeat that to myself on a daily basis. I can't and I mustn't. Because it's family. And we have to let go of the work thing for a bit. And my sister is a vet. She's very busy. Obviously, she's got a little baby. He's now 6 months. And it's great, but it's chaos. And so it's kind of, the agile tools bit is about using them to make a little bit of order, a little bit of sense out of the chaos of that newborn and wedding and all the emotions running really, really high, and still being able to move forwards and progress without it dissolving into being angsty and stressful. This is my Labrador Tor. He's very good. He's completely obsessed by balls. So I now can't say certain words in the house because he understands them. So we have to talk about spherical objects. And we can't talk about swimming because he adores swimming. We have to talk about splashing in the water. And so, again, and it's a really minor thing, but it's about adapting to change in that as we learn, as we figure out how our families, how our colleagues, how our lives work, and then it changes again. But as we figure that out, we figure out the changes and adaptations that we need to make. And the reason there's parking signs there is my mum died in January. And she was an amazing woman, absolutely incredible woman. Very, very bright, very loving, very caring, and an utterly generous soul. My default setting, when my mum died, was to organise the shit out of it. You bring me that funeral, I will sort it out, I will make you parking signs. Because that's what made me feel better. At that point in time, that was what I needed to do. And it wasn't until a little bit afterwards that I suddenly went, whoa, that world that I thought I knew, that I thought I had a grip on, that I thought I was, dare I say it, in control of, has suddenly turned on its head. My point of reference was my mum. And I didn't realise that until she died. Well, actually, I didn't realise it until about 3 months ago. But in that process, my world tilted on its axis. And so it's all well and good having a plan. I had a plan for January, February, March. That didn't happen. So the whole agile grief thing is, it just turns things around. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but this thing called life is full of those curveballs. So the agile application to that is how do we use that structure, that way of thinking, that modus operandi to enable us to cope with it.
I just want to talk a little bit about agile kids and how they are inherently agile. Like they are it's a bit like when kids started using iPads and smartphones. It's absolutely natural for them to start using them. And I, as an Agile practitioner, have post-it notes and Sharpies in my house at all times. They're always in the kitchen. So I just find little love notes from my daughter, sometimes in my diary. Sometimes I find little pictures of flamingos and that kind of thing. Anyway, so she started doing her to-do list on her door. I've never taught her about Kanban or how it works, but she just started doing it. And what I found really interesting is you can't quite see this, because if you see on the right, you can't really see what's written on the post-it notes because she was using a pencil or a biro, and I was like, you see, darling, you need a Sharpie. That way, we can take a photo of it and you can see what's written on the post-it note. She's like, okay, Mum, awesome. So her kind of like swim lane is haven't done, almost done, done. Almost is spelt A-L-L-M-O-S-T. And what she's put at the top is every job is worth 50p, Olivia's jobs. So what hasn't happened at the beginning? We haven't scoped the project out and agreed the value together, because the jobs are make bed, brush teeth, lay the table, get dressed is spelled D-R-E-S-T. And I'm like, Olivia, it's going to take me it's going to cost me a tenner just to get you out of the house every single morning. But I just love that she started doing it. Like, she just knew how to do it. And then we had a bit of a continuous improvement moment where I was like, okay, let's use Sharpies, let's move this around a bit. But yeah, I feel like kids are inherently agile.
So one of the things that George is doing at the moment is a fundraising campaign. He came up with, so last Christmas he had a duplicate present. He had a second Lego set that was exactly the same. And he said, Mummy, I'm not going to make the same Lego twice, but I'd like to give it away. I went, okay, fine, that's cool, yeah, great. And so we took it to Trelisk Children's Ward, and he wrapped it up for Christmas, and we gave it to the Children's Ward, which was all lovely. Thought nothing more of it until January, when he came home from school with a wad of white paper folded in half. And I kind of went, darling, we do have paper, it's okay. We don't need to steal from school, it's all right. And he went, no, Mummy, I'm going to write some books for the children in Trelisk, and I'm going to write the stories over the years so that for Christmas. And I kind of went, George, that is an utterly beautiful thing to do. I absolutely will support you. And this kind of went into a bit of a conversation on the continuous improvement kind of idea, and it's kind of become a bit of a monster. George is now doing a challenge every month. He's trying to raise £1,000 for 6 different charities, and those challenges have included trampolining, Lego, we're currently on at the moment, which is a different model every day for 30 days, out of the same 30 blocks. That's not challenging for me in the slightest. He's well away, I'm the one that's behind. We're going to do a Cross Creek swim where we live, and so on and so forth. Lots of different things. He's done a filmmaking challenge and baking challenge, all kinds of different things, which is lovely, and it's very generous of him, and it's great. But oh my word, I wish he'd just stop being I wish he'd be a bit less agile on it. Because he's just running away with it, and it is great when they take that baton and they run away with it, and they find their own path and their own ideas. Is brilliant, but yeah, we need to be agile in response.
This is a bit of an interesting aspect. I almost didn't have the guts to talk about this, but I think given that, yeah, we were just talking about life is not waterfall, and you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what's going to come around the corner, and I feel, I don't want to have a bit of a feminist rant, but I felt as I was brought up in a bit of a sausage factory of girls are well behaved, they go to school, they go to college, they probably go to university, they get a good job, they find a nice man, they get married, and then they have kids. So that's what I did, because I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing. It's waterfall, it's like a Gantt chart of life. And I got there, and just like back in the day when we used to deliver software over an 18-month period, and then we get there and we're like, it's gone over budget, it's not meeting the brief. I got there and I was like, I'm not happy. Why am I not happy? And so I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of what happened with my ex-husband and I, but we did get divorced about 2 years ago, and we now have what I believe is a co-parenting relationship that we can be proud of. We were in business together, so we had to unwrap all of that and start again. I started my life again with moving house, changing jobs, leaving the business, having to set up a new business, which is why I sometimes spend periods of time going back to bed in the middle of the day. But ultimately, it's about what value are we trying to create together. So in our parenting life, and he sent me this picture of our youngest Briar, and to me, to me, it kind of like it encapsulates why I'm doing this, why we're here, what is the purpose. So I was in the earlier session a moment ago about what is the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And I think when it comes to, there's something about the divorce system that I'm finding really interesting because it's so backward, and I would love someone to go in and positively disrupt the divorce process, because someone in Southampton who is a judge, who's got loads of legal experience, makes a decision about whether or not Rachel Picken is going to be married anymore, and I find that whole process distinctly uncollaborative, and I would like someone to positively disrupt it. But there are aspects of working through this process, but because we've never done this before, there aren't magazines like when you get married, there isn't a beautiful divorce magazine, there isn't. So how do you know? There's no roadmap for this stuff, okay? So it's just about understanding what you know. What are the core goals? Our core goals were our daughters, and their well-being and their happiness was our core goal. We collaborated. There were times when I probably thought he was an utter knob, and he thought I was a knob, but it's kind of like, okay, we've got to ignore that because we've got to collaborate and get through this period of time. Face-to-face meetings, I recommend that. And it's not easy. You can't have this situation when you're going through this massive life change. But if you can focus on face-to-face and human interaction over people over process, if you can do that, it really helps. Increments of activity, focusing on your sprints. What do you need to get done first and next? And celebrate and support progress, such as when they find a new partner. So I'll move on to my story in a minute, but Mark met his partner, as we often do now, on Match, and she's a nanny, and I'm like, you are a genius. You found a trained nanny to be your girlfriend, and she's amazing, and she's a really awesome person, and I'm proud that she's part of my girl's life. And I know that's all kind of quite Pollyanna, does, divorce and separation. However, I think you've got to celebrate those moments. So we are that annoying couple who sometimes we sit together at sports days and things, because that's what we have to do for our core goals. Which moves me beautifully onto agile dating. So this is the actual Kanban I did for my boyfriend on our first proper date, which is ridiculous. But he's a computer science lecturer. He's a computer science lecturer that doesn't understand Agile, which I thought was bizarre and possibly representative of, where he's been working. But and also I've got a whole group of friends, and we chat on Messenger about kind of how do you find a new partner after you've separated or divorced. And a number of them were getting absolutely tied up in the idea of perfection in their dating. And I was like, no, where's the room for continuous improvement? You can't expect, we need an MVP, people. What is the minimum viable product of the person you're prepared to, because the perfect people aren't out there on Match or Tinder, and you can't, it's not collaborative either, it's not face-to-face, it's all, it's all process over people. So we did, things are going pretty well with my boyfriend. We've been together for about a year. He still keeps these bits of his Kanban in his wallet. But we did to-do, doing, done, and he wanted to go to Hong Kong. He wanted to ride a bike because he's not ridden a bike for years. He wanted to do some snogging. He wanted to go on a date. And there's also an X-rated one, which I've not shared with you. But it's really, yeah. Sometimes it switches backwards and forwards. But it's funny because if you're an agile practitioner and someone says to you, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of a PR consultant, and then I do this thing with Agile, and I'm the UK feature writer for Agile Vox, and then I do a bit of training, and they're like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So yeah, hence Kanbaning on dates is quite amusing. Do you have anything to add to this, Claire?
I really love the whole minimum viable date kind of idea. This idea that actually we accept, allowable weaknesses. Prioritising the things that are really, really important. They are the game changers, the showstoppers, if you like. You know, I couldn't possibly date, I couldn't possibly be with somebody who, fill in whatever would float your boat or not. And so that thing I think is really important, because that's about knowing yourself. That's about knowing what you want and what's important to you and who you resonate with.
And also, falling in love is not linear. It's not a linear process. No. It's not. That's not waterfall either. It's kind of like, yeah, if I were to draw a graph. Agile friendships.
So,
we're doing beautifully on timing, obviously.
How are we doing? We're pretty much spot on, aren't we? Yeah. So we want to talk about agile friendships because Rachel and I have been friends for over a decade, and this was on holiday in the Scillies, which Rachel's going to talk about in a little bit, because we went on holiday to prepare this. This wasn't all we did on holiday, but we went away because we took some time out. And actually, over the last 6 months, for me in particular, that's been a really important feature of changing how I work, rather than always putting everybody else first, of going, hang on a minute, whoa there, I am going to take some time for me. And this was part of that. And the picture in the middle is with my mate Nikki over there, who I've also been friends with for, nearly 20 years, actually. And we went on a weekend in Brighton, because I fell out of love with Brighton massively from a very bad work experience when I just left university. And Nikki took it upon herself to reintroduce me to the wonderful world of Brighton, to help me fall back in love with it. And the picture on the end is, on the right-hand side is my son George, and next to him is a young lad called Stefan. Now, Stefan, this is taken in Iceland. Stefan is 5 and is Icelandic. He speaks no English. And what I love about this particular picture is that those two boys played like they'd known each other for forever. They couldn't communicate to each other in language at all. George doesn't speak any Icelandic, Stefan doesn't speak any English. And yet, they found a way to be friends. And that's the thing that I wanted to take away from this whole idea about agile friendships, is that friendships ebb and flow. And so we have to prioritize the people over the process. Friendships are not waterfall. They are non-linear. They will shift and change as the tide does. And that doesn't mean that they mean any less or any more. It's not about quantifying a friendship. How could you possibly? So friendship is, for me, and certainly in the context of agile friendships, is about adapting to change over following the plan. Because, again, we don't control our friends. So actually agile is a really useful way of thinking about how we engage with our friends, and more broadly, how we accept their friendship too. So it's not just about us going, well, this is my picture of friends. This is like top trumps. These are my cards. These are yeah. I have Rachel, who has this in wine consumption. Although, to be fair, you two are competition on the wine consumption. But it's not about that. It's about recognizing that people are in our lives for particular reasons. We've brought them into our lives. We accept them in our lives for very particular reasons, and they stay in our lives for particular reasons. But they come and go, and that's not something to control or worry about. It's something to enjoy and flex with and adapt to. The thing that I love about all of those, and it's been part of my reflection over the last 6 months in particular, has been that those friendships are incredibly important to me, because they are what keeps me going. They are my recharging. They are the people that I go to when it's all going pear-shaped, and they're also the people that I go to when it's all going brilliantly. They're the people that I message and go, smashed it! Or they're the people that go, crashed the car. Whatever else it might be, those things that both irk and delight us, they're the people that we share. And that's an investment. That's not a selfish thing. That's not indulgent. It's what makes us work. Certainly in my case, it's the fuel that enables me to get up in the morning and to get on. And that's really valuable at that moment in time. So the kind of parallel to this is the being present, in being, well, I think you Rachel said about a mutual friend who talked about, as a consultant, going into a meeting with the show up, show off, off. And that's his kind of mandate for work, is that he goes in, he does what he does best, and then he disappears again. And as a consultant, yeah, that makes sense. But actually, in most of our interactions, actually, if we show up and show off, if we are there, we are living in that moment with our friends as much as in a work context, then we are going to get much more value out of it, surely. And it means we are more able and capable to respond to change as and when things happen for them, for you, for the world around us. This is my mum. She was delightful. But the point I wanted to raise around agile grief is that, firstly, there's loads of stuff about grief. There's not an awful lot of stuff about how you work through it. That is, work as in undertake your profession through that process. Because I've had grandparents, friends, distant relatives, uncle 3 times removed. I've had those people die, and it's kind of gone, okay, yeah, fine, and I've had animals go and all that, and they are just as significant, but I just didn't realise how much it would be for my mum. Now, all the models tell you that it follows this curve, and that it's very linear, and that's how it works, and you go through each of those phases, not necessarily in that order, but generally that's a pattern, and it's recognised, and I take that on board. However, in reality, it's that. And maybe that's because my life is chaos anyway. One of the things I realised is that I believe that our lives resonate at different frequencies. So for me, stuff happens. And I would also say grief isn't necessarily about death. 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, my husband had kidney failure and sepsis. Not a great combination for anybody that's had any interaction with kidney failure and sepsis. Not amazing, and he survived, obviously, but he had 3 weeks of being in hospital and then 3 months of being on dialysis. And amazingly, he's recovering, but what we're finding now is that we're getting new layers of health conditions that come into life. So he's got severe sleep apnea, so if he doesn't have his machine, he stops breathing every minute. He has carpal tunnel syndrome, he has a hernia that's inoperable, and so on. And that's not a pity vote. That is really saying that life resonates at different frequencies. And for us, it's like this. And so, as I said, the only way I've found to deal with that is agile, is taking on that mindset of going, it's okay. And it's okay to not be okay for a bit. It's okay to feel that chaos. It's okay to not know. And that's a really big thing for me, because if you'd asked me 2 years ago, right, we're going to have a list, and we're going to have a plan, and we are going to sort it out. And actually, life just isn't like that. We are all at different frequencies. And actually, that enabled me to really think about how I relate to other people, because they are resonating at different frequencies too. And the moment I accept that not everybody is in this world with me, some people are, it's fine, welcome. For those of you that aren't, that's okay, that's absolutely fine. It's about seeing it from the other person's perspective just a little bit, and recognizing that, yes, my life can seem a bit bonkers, and other people look at it and go, whoa, how the hell do you cope with that? And I'm going, well, I just do. Because it's fine for me. It's my resonant frequency, in the same way that yours is yours. And so figuring that out meant that actually we can get a little bit of order in that chaos, because myself, my sister, my dad, my wider friends and family were all resonating at slightly different frequencies. And we could reconcile that by just going, it's all right, we're not all the same. And that's what we love about it. So we did want to talk a little bit about work. And this was work for me last autumn. This is Bloodhound. It's a supersonic car. It's worth £40 million. They're going to spend an awful lot more on it before it hits the world land speed record. It did some slow tests at just 200 miles an hour on the runway at Newquay Airport. And I managed the events, and it was public. We had 3 days of public events, the first of which was the media event, where we had over 200 of the world's press on site for an event that had never been done before, where we were taking 4,000 people airside on a live runway. The risk involved, as you can probably appreciate, was fairly significant, in that it was Newquay Airport. And for those of you that flew into Newquay, you'll appreciate that it is little more than a shed. Well, it was, about 10 years ago, it was a shed. That was the sum total of the infrastructure at Newquay. Now, obviously, it is growing, which is brilliant, but putting this down the runway at 200 miles an hour, working with Cornwall Council, who've never encountered anything like this before, because it's never been done before, was one of those things where all of a sudden we had to really rethink the rule book in terms of not the compliance bit, that still has to happen, but how the hell do we negotiate the fact that there's an instrument landing system that comes off the runway in a 1 in 7 gradient, and we need to put a 12-metre structure as close to the runway as we can? And I know it's pretty basic trigonometry, but do you know what? I was sat in a room full of health and safety experts, aviation engineers, mechanical engineers, armed forces, police, fire service, etc., and I had to draw it out and go, it's okay, it's entirely manageable, let's not panic about it. And that was the point where it was very much about understanding the people that I was sat in that room with and recognising that we're not all in the same place and we need to just take a step back, let's retell the story again to get to the point where we can agree it, because getting permission was really important for this. We couldn't just go ahead and apologise afterwards. And I am a big advocate of sometimes not worrying about permission and just apologising. But in this case, it was kind of important. Given that Fox News took us around the world for 24 hours, I think we kind of had to get it right. But the thing was with this, that on the first day, on the media day, it was really foggy. In fact, from my side of the airfield, I couldn't see the air traffic control tower. That's not good when you've got 4,000 people potentially going in the path of a vehicle going at 200 miles an hour. That's bad, right? We had to have that conversation, and that kind of crisis conversation that starts with, what the hell are we going to do? And in that event control, with fairly high-level people, that moment of going, this is not the time to be worrying about anything else. This is a time to be really, really focused, be utterly present in that moment to find a solution. Our solution at 9 a.m. was, let's wait and see. Because the weather's the weather. And we know Newquay Airport, and I was with the operations manager from Newquay Airport, and he was kind of going, I reckon it's going to clear. The forecast was that it would clear, but... and so we waited. And every moment that the fog lifted a little bit, we'd get a bit excited. And half an hour later, another conversation, oh, maybe hang on another half an hour. And at this point, BBC Breakfast are broadcasting live from the hangar, just down the... We've got media arriving. This is no time to call off the show. No pressure or anything. But this is the point I try to get to in terms of that personal bit of Agile, is that moment of going, the rest of life actually needs to go away. I have to segment this out of my head and focus on this thing that I've got to do, this decision that I've got to make right now. And the same applies when we're working with, within our teams, in my case with clients, with our supplier organisation. It's all about that communication and that moment of being present in the conversation, that we can prioritise the people that we're talking to over and above the process, because actually if we're savvy with it, if we think about it, then the process will happen. That will follow if we get the people stuff right. And even in the really complicated, complex situations, we can make that work by following that Agile principle.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about my work. I'm a chartered PR practitioner, so I do a lot of work around PR strategy, planning, as well as implementing. I also find myself working with branding a lot, so naming of organisations, products, discovering what the purpose and the brand values are of an organisation or the work that they do. What I find with all of that is it's very, very, I quite often get, I find an element of the Agile Manifesto I find really interesting is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So last year I started working with a domestic abuse charity in Cornwall that was merging with another domestic abuse charity in Plymouth, and they needed a brand new name. And the chief exec came to me and they wanted to cram a 6-month project into a 3-month project. And they were like, so when can we have a website live? And I was like, well, we kind of need to figure out the naming stuff first. That's quite an involved piece of work. Okay, well, when can that be done? And I'm like, well, in theory, it can be done by this point. However, and it was a completely kind of waterfall approach, but also I spent about 2 weeks fiddling around with the contract, pushing a contract backwards and forwards between myself and the chief executive, which just ate up valuable time on the project. And in the end, he never actually signed the contract. So he spent 2 weeks fiddling around with the contract, when actually it was about building trust between myself and that client. And I'm still working with this client, and when I finish this presentation, I've got to leg it to another brand presentation because we are currently naming a new service for Cornwall that's being delivered by this charity. And we went through a similar process with branding where you think you've got it nailed, and then someone turns up and says, no, I don't like that name. So we are currently about to go back to the drawing board. And what I find interesting about the world of work now and the world of work where in PR and communications is that, and I'm the only practitioner that I'm aware of that is using Agile in public relations, which I find astonishing because the PR world changes all the time. We're working with media, we're working with customers, we're working with stakeholders, and all of that are transient kind of people and worlds, and I can't quite understand why the industry has been quite so slow on the uptake. But I've done various presentations about this, so I won't go on about it too much. I just wanted to have a little... as we draw to a close, I've got about 5 minutes left, I wanted to talk about, Claire and I thought about wine-driven development. So we went to the Isles of Scilly about 3 weeks ago, and we were like... because we've worked together for years, we're kind of like, we see ourselves as a high-performing team. We're like a Formula One pit team. So it might be, okay, I'm going to go and get tickets for the boats, you go and get cash and the coffees, I'll meet you on the quay. Done. And we came across St Martin's Vineyard, and we were like, okay, it's 2 o'clock, can we have a bottle of wine, please? Is it chilled? Okay, can you open it for us? It was unlabelled by this point. Yeah. They insisted on sticking the label on it. But we were like, yeah, this is all about wine-driven development. And the whole holiday was ultimately a big life retrospective because it's an opportunity to stop. And we did it without kids and without men, which was really important. The concept I came up with lying on this beach with this bottle of wine was I need to be able to aim to operate at 80% awesome. So if you're comfortable with the Pareto principle, we spend a lot of our time trying to be 100% awesome. In my case, 120% awesome, and I'm only really delivering about 50% awesome because I'm knackered. So my new kind of like way of looking at things is how can I be 80% awesome because that's, just good enough, isn't it? And how important it is to stop and take stock. The other thing interesting thing about our holiday is that I felt under enormous pressure because Claire is an event manager, and in a kind of self-organising team sense, Claire and I don't work on straightforward projects, so at the time I booked the holiday, she was trying to negotiate articulated trucks onto Carbis Bay through the equivalent of like the eye of a needle, and I just thought, I'm just going to book it. She's going to trust me, and I'll just book it. So I booked a nice hostel, and it was all fine, but it was, that sense of trust. But yeah, there's not enough time in our life for life retrospectives, I find. And I think about that in relation to my relationships and my marriage. Where was there the space to have a life retrospective and say, this isn't working for me, and working through it?
Yeah, for me it took that my mum dying to kick me into that life retrospective to go, what the hell am I doing with stuff, life and everything? And we don't necessarily need to wait for that. Why not take a bit of time to do it ourselves? And kind of this kind of picking up on what Gert was talking about yesterday, but the only certainty is that nothing is certain, and we kind of need to let go of that certainty illusion and move on, because stuff changes all the time. And a plan is only, a battle plan is only good until you meet the enemy. Planning is only so much of the journey. It's not all of it. Because actually, I think it would be really dull if it were. That's part of the excitement, right? Is that we don't know. And if we accept that risk, that uncertainty, then we can accept that constant change and make more of it. Take absolute advantage of the opportunity that presents. And yes, I am an eternal optimist, just like my mum was. And that eternal optimism means that even in the worst of circumstances, I will always, always find something good. Even if it's that the sun is shining or that there is cake on the table, I don't mind, or wine in the fridge. So part of it is also letting go of the worry about it. I'm worried that I don't know. Why am I worried I don't know? Am I worried that I won't be able to cope? Well, the thing is, we human beings are pretty amazing at coping. We find ways to, and we surround ourselves with other people that will help us to do exactly that. So if we're worried about it, then let's make sure that we put stuff in place to disseminate that worry, to dispel it. Being proactive and choosing our response. We can't control the world. We can't control life. We can only choose how we respond to it. And I have to remind myself again of that all the time, because if I try and influence, manipulate, control a situation that I'm in, it will always end badly, for me. It will always go pear-shaped, because I can't do it. None of us can. And so we have to accept that there's that fluidity, that we are part of a much bigger network, and therefore there are other players and actors upon our situations. And building our resources, building our agile friendships, building our positive relationships around us, finding those people. I'm very fortunate. I have an amazing black book, not only of interesting, fascinating, beautiful people, but of people that are really, really useful. Really, the people that can find you something like prescription contact lenses when you haven't got their prescription and they haven't been to an optician for 12 months. That's really hard, just by the by. And people like that, people who can help you solve those tricksy problems that you can't possibly predict, those people are your resources. They're the ones to play with. It's not actually about money. It's not about buildings or plant or infrastructure. It's about people, and it's about those people that will help you to solve that problem and be a self-organizing team. A really high-performance one, because there's that respect and trust and collaboration and the ability to pick up the phone and go, I know I haven't spoken to you for 4 years, but I need your help. And so building your resources by building those relationships that you can pick up the phone and go, you know, you're really good at this. Could you help me out with?
Final slide. Have anyone here heard of the spoon theory? I heart the spoon theory. So this is, Google it and look it up. It's, there's a blog by a lady who has lupus, so it's used to describe people who have long-term health conditions. And the idea is you start the day with a finite number of spoons. So say it's 20 spoons. So presenting to you today is probably about 6 spoons. I've got to save some spoons to go and present a brand this afternoon. I've also got to try and go to the chemist on my way back from school, and I then need to go to a roller disco tonight. There's quite a few spoons being consumed today. So it's how you use your spoons. So yesterday, I had to reserve spoons, had to save some spoons and have a rest. Because ultimately, and this is a quote that's stuck with me so many times from my friend who's an accountant, you only have the same amount of hours in the day as Beyonce. So how are you going to use your time? Thank you.
Thanks very much.